You know, when you picture the absolute pinnacle of modern farming, your brain probably goes straight to scale, like massive scale.
Oh, yeah, like those massive multi-ton air-conditioned mega tractors.
Exactly. The ones guided by a network of satellites, just, rolling over endless horizons of wheat.
It really feels like the ultimate triumph of human engineering.
It does. But, well, if you take that multi-million-dollar state-of-the-art machine and drop it into the reality where most of the world's food is actually grown, that triumph of engineering suddenly becomes completely useless.
Yeah, because you just can't maneuver a massive piece of industrial equipment through a highly fragmented, irregular, maybe 2-acre plot of land.
Right. And that massive disconnect between the giant machines we build and the tiny farms that feed a huge portion of the world is exactly what the engineering specs sitting in front of us today are trying to solve.
Which is why the executive pitch documents and those incredibly detailed product renders we're unpacking in this deep dive are so
I
fascinating.
mean, they really are.
Yeah. So we are looking at a machine branded the Rover Eco, or sometimes they call it the Microfarm Rover in the docks. And the entire premise here is a rigorous exercise in scaling down.
Scaling way down.
Exactly. While the broader agricultural robotics industry is focused on massive scale, wider boom sprayers, heavier payloads, these designers are attempting to revolutionize food production on the smallest, most overlooked plots of land on Earth.
Yeah, their focus is heavily on what the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization calls sustainable agricultural mechanization.
Right.
But I think we actually need a quick disclaimer for you listening before we get too deep into the weeds here.
Oh, definitely. Good call.
Because the authors of these pitch documents argue pretty forcefully that large agricultural companies have historically ignored this smallholder market. And the engineering specs we're looking at, they lean heavily on those UN FAO climate smart mandates as their guiding philosophy.
They do. It's woven into all the design choices.
Yeah, but to be clear, we are just unpacking the arguments and the designs presented in these specific source documents to understand why this rover was built the way it was. We aren't endorsing any specific market critiques or, ecological ideologies.
Right. We're just looking at the blueprints.
Exactly. But we have to look at the author's foundational mindset to make sense of the actual hardware.
And that context is crucial for understanding the design constraints they were working under. I mean, to grasp why this rover was engineered this way, you have to look at the massive blind spot highlighted in their market data.
The stats are wild.
They really are. Globally, farms under 2 hectares, which is roughly 5 acres, they make up about 5 out of every 6 farms on the planet.
I have to stop there for a second. That statistic is staggering to me.
Hmm.
5 out of 6 farms worldwide are essentially the size of a large suburban lot.
Yeah, they're small, but they are mighty. Despite operating on a highly fragmented share of total agricultural land, those farms produce roughly 35% of the world's food supply.
Wow, over a third of the world's food.
Yeah. And in low-income economies, the World Bank project's agriculture will account for about 59% of total employment by 2025.
That's a massive segment of the workforce.
It is. Yet, despite being the absolute backbone of global food security, these farmers face a severe mechanization gap.
Because, well, shrinking a traditional internal combustion tractor down to that size just creates a physics and logistics nightmare.
Oh, absolutely. The physics just don't work out.
Right, diesel engines are incredibly heavy. And to support that weight, you need massive tires to prevent the machine from sinking into the mud, which compacts the soil.
And soil compaction is exactly what you don't want.
Exactly. Not to mention, smallholder farmers often don't have easy access to bulk diesel fuel anyway. So the engineers realize you can't just, build a cheaper, tinier traditional tractor. It fundamentally does not work.
And the absence of that mechanization leaves these communities heavily reliant on manual labor or, in a lot of cases, animal traction.
Like using an ox.
Yeah, an ox or just hand tools. And that creates a cascading series of inefficiencies. I mean, if you're prepping a field by hand or with an ox, your speed is severely limited.
Which artificially caps your planting windows, right?
Exactly. If the rains come and you only have 4 days to get your seeds in the ground, you can only plant as much land as human hands can physically manage in 96 hours.
Man, 96 hours. That's a stressful window.
It's grueling, it limits productivity, the physical toll on the farmers is immense, and it permanently caps their yield potential.
So if an internal combustion engine is totally off the table, what does the hardware actually look like?
It's totally different.
Yeah, looking at the renders in these source files, it is a completely different paradigm. Like, for you listening, picture a four-wheel electric Rover with aggressive, knobby tires. It has this overarching canopy made entirely of a single solar panel, shielding a rugged green and metal frame.
It genuinely looks like a high-tech Mars rover that was built specifically to play in the mud.
That is the perfect way to describe it. It looks
Yep.
like a space rover.
The visual is striking, sure, but the engineering documents reveal a design philosophy that is just obsessed with pragmatic local repairability.
Yeah, they really emphasize the local aspect.
Because it is shockingly compact. It's only 120 centimeters long and 85 centimeters wide.
Okay, to put that in perspective for our listeners, it weighs about 120 kilograms, which is roughly 260 pounds.
Right, it's not a multi-ton beast.
Not at all. I mean, if you've ever tried to push a broken riding lawnmower out of a muddy ditch, you know how heavy even small machinery gets?
Yeah.
The fact that it's only 260 pounds means if this thing breaks down in the middle of a field, 2 or 3 people can easily just push it back to a shed.
Exactly.
You are never doing that with a John Deere combine.
No way. And that weight class dictates everything else about the design. Because it's meant for remote areas, it is not locked down with proprietary, unfixable technology.
No DRM on the tractor parts.
Right. The chassis is a welded steel tube frame. That means a local village workshop with a basic welding kit can repair a cracked strut.
That's brilliant.
It really is. It uses standard brushless DC motors and heavy-duty bicycle or motorcycle-style wheels, things you can find almost anywhere.
I noticed they were very specific about the power supply, too. They didn't just throw a standard lithium-ion battery in there like you'd find in a laptop or an electric car.
No, they didn't.
They specifically chose a 48-volt, 30-amp-hour lithium iron phosphate battery, or LiFePO4.
The choice of LiFePO4 is honestly a masterclass in designing for the environment. Standard lithium-ion batteries, the ones with cobalt and nickel, they can be really prone to thermal runaways if they get damaged or overheat.
Which means they catch fire.
Exactly. And if you are operating a rover in a field where temperatures might exceed 100 degrees Fahrenheit, and you are miles away from the nearest fire suppression equipment,
A battery fire is catastrophic.
completely catastrophic.
Okay.
But LiFePO4 chemistry is incredibly thermally stable.
It is much safer.
Way safer. You can dent it, you can leave it out in the baking sun, and it simply will not combust the way other chemistries might.
Plus, that specific battery gives the rover an impressive 6 to 10 hours of runtime. And that's augmented by a 3.5-hour solar assist charging capability from that canopy we mentioned.
It's very self-sufficient.
But having a battery on wheels isn't enough to replace an ox, right? It has to actually do the hard work.
Oh.
And the way they solve the physics of pulling a plow with a 260-pound machine is fascinating.
Yeah, they abandon brute force entirely.
Because traditional farming relies on horsepower, using raw, heavy drag force to rip massive steel plows through deep, resistant soil.
Right, and because the AgriRover Eco is so light, it cannot generate that kind of downforce.
It just spin its wheels.
Exactly. Instead, it travels incredibly slowly, operating at speeds between 0 and 7 kilometers per hour.
That is a walking pace.
Barely. It replaces brute heavy force with slow, continuous, high-torque precision.
It's essentially a modular power base.
Yes.
Think of it less like a tractor and more like a heavy-duty autonomous power tool. It's one base vehicle, but you can swap out the functional ends.
Detached.
Yeah. You can attach a shallow strip tiller module. Then when the soil is prepped, you swap that out for a precision seeder and fertilizer module. And then later in the season, you swap that out for a targeted spot sprayer.
And having those interchangeable tools is an elegant mechanical solution, sure, but what makes this machine fundable, what actually constitutes its defensible intellectual property, is the intelligence layer that coordinates those tools.
The brain of the operation.
Yes. The executive overview introduces a concept called VLA captioning, which stands for Vision Language Action.
Okay, this is where the specs start to sound a bit like science fiction.
A little bit, yeah.
The rover uses its onboard cameras to essentially narrate what it sees in human language. It actually generates sentences.
Real-time narration.
Yeah. The example they provide in the pitch document reads, quote, "The soil strip is dry enough for planting. The maize row is visible. No obstacle is detected. Fertilizer can be applied at low dose. Sprayer remains off."
It's literally talking to itself about the field.
Now hold on. As someone who reads a lot about AI, my immediate reaction to this is absolute terror.
Oh, I'm sure it is.
Because we have all seen large language models hallucinate. We have seen them confidently invent completely fabricated information out of nowhere.
Right, the AI hallucinations.
Yeah. If I'm a farmer, I do not want a robot hallucinating while it's driving autonomously through my field with spinning metal blades and a tank full of chemicals. That sounds like a massive liability.
The engineering team clearly anticipated that exact reaction.
I would hope so.
Yeah, which is why the architecture they detail is built around a concept called explainable autonomy.
Okay, explain that.
So they drew inspiration from cutting-edge systems like Google DeepMind's RT2 or the open-source OpenVLA model, but they implemented a strict structural firewall.
A firewall?
Yes, the VLA model, the artificial intelligence generating those narrative sentences, has absolutely zero direct control over the motors, the tiller, or the sprayer.
Oh, I see. So the AI is essentially just a spotter sitting in the passenger seat.
That is the perfect way to look at it.
It can look out the window and shout out what it sees, but it doesn't actually have its hands on the steering wheel.
Exactly. The VLA's only job is to generate those structured field observations.
Okay.
Those text-based observations are then passed through a firewall into a completely separate, hard-coded safety and agronomy rules engine.
So not an AI.
Not an AI. This engine is a strict, deterministic set of if-then rules.
So the AI might say, I see a maize plant. The soil is dry, there are no humans around. And the rules engine acts like a rigid checklist and says, okay, condition A is met, condition B is met, you are authorized to deploy exactly 3 seeds.
Exactly. And if the AI generates a hallucinated or nonsensical observation that doesn't perfectly match the safe conditions mapped in the rules engine, the machine defaults to an off state.
It just shuts down.
It simply stops. Furthermore, this makes the machine's decision-making entirely auditable.
Which is huge.
It's massive. A farm cooperative, a lender, or a technician can download the log and read, in plain English, the exact logic path of why the rover took a specific action at a specific centimeter in the field.
That explainability is huge for building trust. So we know how the machine navigates and thinks safely, but the branding is literally Agri-Rover Eco. How does that intelligence layer translate into actual measurable ecological benefits?
Well, if we look closely at the specific modules outlined in the engineering specs, there is a direct mechanical application of those FAO principles for reduced soil compaction and climate-smart farming.
Let's start with how it prepares the soil.
Sure. Traditional agriculture often utilizes deep, full-field tillage. You turn up the entire field to create a uniform planting bed.
But agronomy tells us that deep tillage actually destroys the complex mycelial networks in the soil. It ruins the soil structure, drastically increases the risk of topsoil erosion, and, frankly, burns a massive amount of energy.
Which is why the rover uses a shallow strip tiller module.
Instead of tearing up 100% of the field.
Right. It only disturbs a narrow 10 to 25 centimeter strip, and it only goes 2 to 5 centimeters deep.
So it's just scratching the surface.
It is surgically prepping the exact line of dirt where the seed will be placed, leaving the surrounding soil architecture and moisture completely intact.
And that surgical precision continues with the planting and fertilizing modules. I saw on the docks they detail an 18-liter seed hopper paired with a matching 18-liter fertilizer hopper.
Yeah, they work in tandem.
Because in many traditional setups, fertilizer is broadcast widely across a whole field. And a huge percentage of that fertilizer never reaches the plant. It just washes away in the next rainstorm as toxic runoff.
It's terribly inefficient.
Right. So the rover fixes this by using a microdose auger dispenser.
It places a highly controlled, granular dose of fertilizer exactly into the plant's root zone alongside the seed.
Just giving the plant exactly what it needs.
Right. They specifically note they are targeting crops like maize, beans, and sorghum for their first rollout, as those larger seeds are easier to meter mechanically.
Makes sense.
By placing the fertilizer directly at the root, you drastically reduce the total volume of chemicals required per hectare while actually increasing the nutrient uptake for the plant.
But I feel like the place where the tension between automation, ecology, and safety hits its absolute peak is the insecticide module.
Oh, without a doubt.
Because spraying chemicals is incredibly high stakes. The rover has a 15-liter tank for this, and the design utilizes shielded nozzles, which physically block the wind from carrying the chemical mist away from the target weed or plant.
Drift control is a huge priority.
Yeah, but even with those physical shields, the engineering docs highlight a massive, bolded, hard rule for version 1 of the rover.
The rule is unequivocal: no autonomous, unsupervised chemical spraying.
So it cannot just drive around the field blasting insecticide on its own, no matter how confident the AI is.
No. The system requires a human in the loop. The VLA system might successfully identify a pest or a harmful weed, but the machine is programmed to stop, ping the farmer's mobile app with a photo and an alert, and just wait.
It asks for permission.
Yes. The human operator has to review the alert and physically hit approve. And even after approval, the rover checks its own onboard wind sensors to ensure conditions are safe before it activates the solenoid nozzles.
It fundamentally changes the relationship with agrochemicals. Like, instead of carpet bombing an entire field as a preventative measure, the rover is calling in a highly targeted airstrike on a specific weed.
That's exactly what it is.
But the strike cannot launch until the human commander reviews the intel and explicitly gives the green light.
It's an incredibly smart design choice. It builds trust with a demographic that might be skeptical of robotics. It drastically lowers the sheer volume of expensive chemicals a farmer has to purchase. And, of course, it prevents widespread environmental contamination.
Okay, so the mechanical engineering is clever, the software architecture is safe, and the ecological benefits make total sense. But we have to address the elephant in the room here.
The cost.
Yes, the cost. We are talking about an AI-powered, solar-charging, multi-module robotic platform.
That doesn't sound cheap.
No. How does a smallholder farmer in a developing market, someone who might currently rely on a rented ox, actually afford this technology?
The executive pitch documents tackle that economic reality head-on. They explicitly acknowledge that direct-to-consumer sales to individual smallholder farmers are completely unrealistic for initial adoption.
Yeah, that makes sense.
These farmers often have significant land assets, but they lack the liquid capital for a major hardware purchase. So the primary business model they outline is Rover as a Service, or RaaS.
So shifting the financial burden from a capital expenditure to an operational expenditure.
Right.
It's like hiring a highly efficient local contractor instead of taking out a massive 10-year loan to buy your own bulldozer.
That is the exact economic mechanism. Under the RaaS model, a local farming cooperative, an NGO, or a local entrepreneurial operator actually owns the physical machine and maintains it.
Okay, so they hold the asset.
Yes. And they then lease its labor to individual farmers per hectare or per season.
So the farmer gets all the upside of precision agriculture, the increased yields, the reduced backbreaking labor, the lower chemical costs, without having to front the thousands of dollars to buy the robot.
Exactly.
They just hire the service for the specific 48-hour window they need their field planted.
And to make that economic model viable from day one, the product roadmap detailed in the engineering specs reveals a very disciplined minimum viable product, or MVP, strategy.
They aren't trying to do everything at once.
No, they're not trying to deploy the fully autonomous, weed-zapping sci-fi robot immediately.
Right, looking at the timeline, Phase 1 and Phase 2 of the rollout strictly focus on the electric chassis, the autonomous row following, seed planting, and fertilizer microdosing.
They are purposefully holding back the complex AI vision systems and the targeted insecticide spraying until much later phases.
Why is that? Just safety.
Safety is part of it, but mostly because planting seeds at perfect intervals and microdosing fertilizer exactly at the root delivers immediate, mathematically provable, high-value results.
It guarantees a more uniform crop emergence and a higher yield right away.
Yes. And from an engineering standpoint, dropping a seed in a straight line is significantly easier to validate safely than autonomous chemical spraying. They are establishing a foundation of reliable, undeniable utility first.
You prove to the farmer that the machine can drive straight and drop seed reliably, and you prove to the local operator that the machine generates reliable leasing revenue before you ever introduce a tank of poison to the equation.
Exactly. Build the trust in the economics first.
So, pulling all of these specs and pitches together, the core proposition here is a low-cost electric farm assistant that reduces severe physical labor, increases crop consistency, and protects soil health.
All while bridging a massive mechanization gap in the developing world.
It's a huge undertaking.
It is. If we step back and look at the broader implications, this technology represents a necessary shift in how we approach global agriculture. Well, we are facing a future where we must maintain, or likely increase, global crop yields to feed a growing population. But we have to achieve that with drastically fewer inputs, less fresh water, less synthetic fertilizer, less fossil fuel.
The UN mandates we talked about at the top.
Right. This rover is a literal manifestation of doing more with less by replacing broad, heavy, destructive actions with small, precise, continuous ones.
It really is a total paradigm shift. And there's one final thought I want to leave you with, looking at the long-term data logging capabilities of this rover.
Oh, the data implications are huge.
They are. We talked about how the VLA system narrates the field and how it logs every single action to that rules engine for auditability.
Yeah, every centimeter is recorded.
Think about the implications of that data collection at scale. As these rovers roll out, operated by local cooperatives, they will be logging exact seed counts, precise fertilizer microdoses, soil moisture levels, and crop health data, literally centimeter by centimeter.
It's a goldmine of agronomic data.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Consider this: what happens when the most remote, historically fragmented smallholder farms on Earth suddenly become the most data-rich, precisely mapped agricultural networks in the world.
It completely flips the script.
It does.
Yeah.
How does that massive influx of ground-level intelligence change the global food economy forever? It's something to think about.
Definitely.
Until next time, thanks for joining us on this deep dive.